Hey there, Dragon Slayer Lab. Are you excited for Shadow of the Erd Tree? Good heavens, man! What happened to you?
Ha ha ha! Don't talk to me. I'm watching Vader build videos on YouTube.
Gee, I don't know about this, Ant Spur Lab. Isn't using Scarlet Rot on hosts at low levels before they can cure it a bit mean-spirited, especially on an already strong weapon like a thrusting sword? Wouldn't this dig the already cavernous pit that is the animosity between invaders and parties even deeper?
Ha ha ha! I don't know what you're talking about, man. Too busy raking in the rune arcs.
The heck's a rune arc? Welcome to Scrub Armory. Thrusting swords in a 1v1 are laughably strong. If you even kind of know what you're doing, you can just curb stomp most average players. They have dagger-like speed, stat recs and weight comparable to straight swords, do strong stagger relative to their size and weight, and can pull off very high damage numbers. And since almost every attack you have is a thrust, your attacks have lots of forward reach, as well as the benefit of having counter hits. And if all this isn't enough, they can be used very effectively in any way. One-handed, two-handed, in the offhand, dual-wielded, doesn't matter, it works. And if you think you can just circle around behind their pokes for an easy backstab, guess again, nerd! They can even turn on a dime mid R1. But don't get too excited and jump on the cheesy build bandwagon just yet. Don't want to wind up like this guy. Every weapon class has a catch, and thrusting swords are no exception. I said they're very strong in 1v1, but there's no such thing as a 1v1 invasion, no matter what the rune-arced Grace duelists camping out on Bogard's lawn try to tell you. If you want the 1v1, you gotta make that happen by murdering all the host's groupies. And because all but two thrusting swords only have thrusting attacks, you're hurting for horizontal swings. What are you gonna do when Timbo, his two bodyguards, and hordes of the fun police are breathing down your neck, out for your blood, steamrolling all the PvE in sight, and all you've got between you and them is a twiggy sword? Thrusting sword builds that are able to handle the pressures of the group fight tend to fall into one of two groups, buff builds or off-stock builds. Buff builds win invasions by going all in on single target DPS, the logic being that if you can't hit a bunch of guys at once, you must be able to kill one guy very fast. Aside from doing lots of damage, these builds benefit from the fact that many buffs can stack, as long as they're not the same type of buff. The downside being that buff builds are only optimal for a short while. Spell buffs and Ash buffs require FP, which means you're going to be chugging Windex like it's going out of style. Meanwhile, multi-hit and Spear Talisman builds require you to play aggressively and risk HP to increase your damage. Buff builds also suffer from timing. Maybe your buffs are active when it's not an optimal time to be, or maybe they'll just wear off whenever you just need a little more damage. Buff builds are also a bit neutered in Ash variety, as your choices are pretty much limited to escape options, buffs, or get-off-me's. Meanwhile, off-stock builds are better suited for fighting a group the traditional way. You have a weapon that's capable of horizontal swings and does big damage in the right hand, while your offhand has a long thrusting sword to poke from neutral and apply quick pressure. Offhand thrusting sword stagger is also bugged as of patch 1.10. You see, with some exceptions, most weapons do this most stagger on the first R1, with subsequent R1s being less effective until the end, where it does extra damage. But thrusting swords in the offhand do as much poise damage on the second L1 as the first, making them a very strong pressuring tool. A dishonorable mention goes out to status builds. All the benefits of thrusting swords like speed, good damage, and stagger makes them one of the nastier options for bleed or cold infusions, and at low levels the Ant Spur is practically a death sentence. There is one deeply personal gripe I have with thrusting swords though. As a professional R2 enjoyer, I hate the fact that lots of thrusting swords get cool R2s but are ultimately overshadowed by R1 spam. In summary, thrusting swords provide a fast option when you're fighting people solo, and are one of the best offhand weapons in the game that's not a shield, spell catalyst, or power stance option. If you're fighting a group, you've got to be choosy about your approach. I recommend just swapping to something with horizontal swings, but they're adaptable enough to make it work if you pick your shots carefully. But what do I know? I'm just a scrub.